Right now, nearly 20% of the world's oil is supposed to pass through one narrow stretch of water. But instead of moving, it's waiting. 2 carrier strike groups, dozens of warships, hundreds of aircraft in the air, and still, the Strait of Hormuz is not open. More than 100 tankers sit anchored outside the strait, burning fuel, losing millions, and freezing global supply. On paper, this should already be over. The United States and its allies have struck Iranian targets across the region. Naval bases damaged, missile sites hit, parts of the fleet wiped out. From the outside, it looks like control. But control is not the same as movement. Because despite all that firepower, ships are still not moving safely through the strait. Attacks continue. Insurance companies pull out. Crews refuse routes. And now, only a small number of ships are willing to take the risk. That is the paradox. The most powerful navy in the world can dominate the sea, but it cannot guarantee a single safe corridor through it. And here is where the logic breaks. You would think this is a firepower problem. Destroy enough targets and the threat disappears. But that is not what is happening here. Because in Hormuz, the rules are different. This is not about winning a naval war. It is about one narrow passage where one mistake changes everything. One tanker, one strike, one burning hull in the wrong place, and the entire strait shuts down. So here is the real question. How can the US Navy control an entire region but still fail to secure just 6 miles of water? On paper, this situation makes absolutely no sense. The United States does not just have presence here, it has dominance. Carrier strike groups bring layered power, fighter jets control the air, destroyers track and intercept threats, submarines operate unseen below the surface. This is the kind of force built to control entire oceans, and Iran knows that. Its conventional navy cannot match this. Larger ships have already been targeted. Fixed bases hit. Command networks disrupted. So if you look at this like a traditional naval conflict, the conclusion is simple. The threat should be gone. Sea control achieved. Enemy degraded. Shipping resumes. That's how it usually works. But Hormuz is not a normal battlefield. Because the objective here is not to defeat the US Navy, it is to make the water unusable. And that changes the equation completely. A navy is designed to destroy targets, to project power, to win battles. But none of that guarantees safe passage. Not in a place where every ship follows the same narrow route, where traffic cannot spread out, and where one successful strike is enough. Because the enemy does not need control. They don't need victory. They only need one moment that gets through. And that is the gap. From a distance, it looks like the US has already solved the problem. In reality, it has only removed the part that you can see. The problem is not the enemy. The problem is the space. The Strait of Hormuz looks wide on a map, roughly 20 miles across at its narrowest point. That sounds manageable? It is not, because ships are not free to move across those 20 miles. They are forced into lanes. 2 narrow shipping corridors, each only about 2 miles wide, separated by a buffer zone. That is it. Everything. Oil tankers, cargo ships, naval escorts is funneled into those fixed paths. And that changes everything. Because now, movement becomes predictable. Every ship follows the same line, at the same speed, in the same direction. There is no room to maneuver, no space to reroute, no way to avoid a threat once it appears. This is not open ocean. This is controlled traffic. And controlled traffic is vulnerable traffic. From the Iranian coastline, that corridor is fully within reach. Missile systems positioned along the shore, launchers hidden in the terrain, drones launched from multiple angles. They don't need to search for targets. They already know where the ships will be. And more importantly, when. That is the shift. This is no longer a naval battle across a wide sea. This is a fixed route under constant observation where every movement is exposed. And once you understand that, the logic changes. Because now the question is no longer can the US Navy control the region? The question becomes, can it protect a predictable line that the enemy can target every single day? This is where most people get it wrong. They look for fleets, for ships, for something the US Navy can destroy. But that is not the real threat here. Because Iran is not trying to win a naval battle. It is trying to break the system. And to do that, it does not need big ships. It needs small, cheap, and hard-to-track tools. Sea mines are the first piece. They do not move, they do not signal, and they do not need guidance. They just sit and wait. Some are anchored below the surface, others drift slowly with the current, and clearing them is slow, painfully so. Every meter has to be checked, every contact investigated. And while all that is happening, traffic stops. Then come the drones. Cheap to produce, easy to launch, hard to track when used in numbers. They do not need to sink a ship, they just need to hit it. Or even get close enough to force a reaction. Because every near miss creates the same effect: uncertainty. And then there are the missiles. Not fired in large waves, but from hidden positions along the coast, mobile launchers, short exposure time, then gone again. You don't need many of them, you just need one to get through. And that is the core logic. This is not about destroying fleets. It is about creating risk. Because global shipping does not run on bravery. It runs on predictability, insurance, schedules, confidence. You remove any one of that, and the system stops itself. And that is exactly what is happening here. So the US Navy responds the only way it knows how. It hunts the threat. Strike the launch sites, destroy the drones, track the boats, clear the mines. And it does all of that very well, but here is the problem. This is not a one-time target. This is a continuous environment. Missile launchers can move. Drones can be relaunched within hours. Mines can be placed faster than they are cleared. So even after a successful strike, the threat comes back. And that creates a coverage problem. Because controlling a region is not the same as securing every moment inside of it. A warship can intercept a missile, but it cannot be everywhere at once. A patrol can clear one section, but it cannot clear the entire corridor all the time. And that is exactly what Hormuz requires. Constant presence, constant scanning, constant protection. Across a narrow lane where timing matters more than distance. Because the attack does not have to be large. It does not have to overwhelm defenses. It just has to slip through once. One drone not intercepted, one mine not detected, one launcher not found in time. That is enough. And here is the uncomfortable truth. The US Navy can reduce the threat, it can manage it, disrupt it, push it back, but it cannot eliminate it completely. Not in a space like this. Not when the enemy only needs one gap. And that is the limitation. not power coverage. So the obvious solution is simple. Escort the ships. Put warships around tankers. Move them through the strait together. Protect them with radar, missiles, and air cover. On paper, that sounds solid. In reality, it is not enough. Because an escort does not remove risk. It concentrates it. Now you have multiple ships moving together through the same narrow lane at predictable times, and that makes targeting easier, not harder. And even with the protection, nothing is guaranteed. A missile can slip through, a drone can get close, a mine can be missed. And escorts cannot stop what they do not see in time. That is the flaw. This is not about defending against every attack. It is about preventing a single successful one. Because the moment one tanker is hit, burning, disabled, blocking the lane, everything stops again. Insurance collapses. Shipping companies pull out. The route shuts itself down. Even if 99 ships pass safely, the 100th one decides the outcome. That is the brutal truth and the brutal math of Hormuz. And it exposes the illusion. Escorts can reduce danger, they cannot remove it. And in this environment, reduced risk is not enough to keep global trade moving. And just as the military problem becomes clear, a second problem appears, the political one. Because reopening Hormuz was never meant to be a solo mission. The United States expected support. Naval coalitions, shared patrols, burden distributed across allies. But that is not what happened. Some allies stepped back. Others called for restraint. Several refused direct involvement altogether. Not because the threat is unclear, but because the risk is. Escorting ships through Hormuz is not symbolic. It's not a show of presence. It is a commitment to operate inside a live threat zone, where one incident can escalate everything. And not every country is willing to take that risk. So now the equation shifts again. Fewer ships available for escort, less coverage across the corridor, more pressure on a single navy to carry the mission, and that matters. Because this is not just about capability, it is about scale. The more limited the coalition, the harder it becomes to maintain constant protection. And in a corridor that depends on constant security, that gap grows quickly. Iran is not trying to close the strait completely. That would be too obvious, too aggressive, too easy to justify a full-scale response. Instead, it is doing something far more effective. It is controlling the chaos. Some ships are attacked, others are not. Some routes feel open until they suddenly are not. And that creates something more powerful than a blockade: uncertainty. Because now every shipping company faces the same question: are we safe, or are we just next? And there is no clear answer. Reports already show that some vessels are still moving, but slowly, cautiously, inconsistently. Not because the route is secure, but because the risk is being managed, not removed. And that is exactly the strategy. So what does this look like in reality? Not a closed strait. Something more unstable than that. Ships are moving, but slowly, in small numbers, without consistency. One day, a few tankers pass through and get by. The next, traffic drops again. That is not recovery, that is hesitation. Outside the strait, vessels are still waiting, crews remain on standby, routes are being recalculated in real time because no one trusts the situation. And that uncertainty spreads fast. Oil markets react immediately. Prices rise not just on supply, but on doubt. Supply chains begin to adjust, delays ripple outward, costs increase across sectors that never even see the strait. And inside the corridor itself, every transit becomes a calculated risk. So now we can answer the question, why can the US Navy control the region but still fail to secure 6 miles of water? Because this was never a problem of strength. It is a problem of conditions. The Navy can dominate the sea, it can destroy targets, it can respond faster than any opponent in the region, but none of that changes the corridor. So the Navy adapts, it reduces the threat, manages the risk, keeps the corridor barely open, but it cannot make it safe. Not completely. And that is the real answer. The Strait of Hormuz is not controlled by power, it is controlled by risk. And now the real question is simple. How do you see the situation, and what do you think the US should do next? Let me know in the comments. Let's keep respect for the men and women serving in the military around the world, because they are the ones operating in these conditions every single day. They are the real legends. Thanks for watching. Help us reach 1,000 subscribers and check out the channel for more military breakdowns like this, and I'll see you in the next video.